BCBS Massachusetts denied your claim, and buried inside the paperwork they sent you is a right that could force them to pay. Not a loophole, not a technicality. A right written into Massachusetts law, backed by a state-appointed independent reviewer whose decision BCBS has to follow. It's called External Independent Medical Review, and it lives inside Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 176.0. Most people never find it. That's not an accident. Everything in this video is for educational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice. Now, here's exactly what this right is, how to use it, and the specific deadlines you cannot miss, because some of them are as short as 4 months from the day that denial letter hit your mailbox. Here's why most people never get there. When BCBS Massachusetts denies a claim, they send you a letter. The letter tells you that you can file an internal appeal. So you do. You spend weeks gathering records, writing letters, calling your doctor, and then BCBS reviews your appeal using their own reviewers, employed by or contracted through BCBS. That's like asking the home team to officiate their own game. Studies suggest that internal appeals succeed at rates under 30% for medical necessity denials. And when the internal appeal fails, most people stop. They assume the system has spoken. That assumption costs them real money. A single denied hospitalization claim can run $40,000 or more. A denied course of chemotherapy can reach 6 figures. And across Massachusetts, most policyholders walk away from those denials simply because nobody told them the internal appeal isn't the end of the road. It's actually step 1 of a 2-step process. The external review is step 2. And BCBS Massachusetts is not required to put it at the top of your denial letter in plain English. They include it, technically, but it's in the fine print, buried under procedural language, written for a compliance officer, not for a person who just got a $60,000 bill. Here's our take, and we'll defend it. This isn't an oversight. When roughly 40% of external reviews get overturned in the patient's favor, every person who doesn't file is money BCBS keeps. The structural incentive to make external review hard to find is enormous, so we're going to make it easy to find. External Independent Medical Review in Massachusetts is governed by Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 176.0, Section 14. Here's what that means in plain English. When BCBS Massachusetts issues a final adverse determination, meaning they've denied your internal appeal, or in some urgent cases even before that, you have the right to have your case reviewed by an independent review organization. People call it an IRO. This is a third-party medical review company that the Massachusetts Division of Insurance appoints. They do not work for BCBS. They are not paid by BCBS on a per-case basis. Their job is to look at your medical records, your doctor's documentation, and the clinical evidence, and decide whether the denial was medically justified. Think of it this way. The internal appeal is you arguing with the home team's referee. The external review is the league sending in a neutral official who doesn't care who wins. And here's the part that matters most. In Massachusetts, the IRO's decision is binding on the insurer. If the independent reviewer says, BCBS Massachusetts should have paid your claim, BCBS Massachusetts has to pay it. They cannot ignore the ruling. They cannot appeal it back against you through the same process. It goes the other way. And this external review costs you nothing. The insurer pays the IRO's fee. You pay $0 to access this right. Now, there's one critical piece of fine print inside this protection. External review under Massachusetts state law applies to fully insured plans, meaning you buy your insurance through BCBS directly, or your employer bought it from BCBS as an insured product. If your plan is self-funded, we'll get to that in a few minutes, because the rules are different and most people don't know which type of plan they have. For now, if you have a standard BCBS Massachusetts individual or small group plan, this state law right applies to you. Has BCBS Massachusetts denied a claim on you and you didn't know this review existed? Drop it in the comments. We read every one. This is the section that determines whether you still have options or whether you've already lost them by waiting. There are 3 deadline windows you need to understand, and they stack on top of each other. Window 1. After BCBS Massachusetts issues an initial claim denial, you have up to 180 days to file an internal appeal. That's the federal standard under the Affordable Care Act, and it applies to your BCBS MA plan. 180 days sounds like a lot. It isn't, because the clock on Window 2 starts the moment the internal appeal decision comes back. Window 2. Once BCBS Massachusetts issues their final internal adverse determination, meaning your internal appeal is denied, you have 4 months to request external review. 4 months from that date. Not 4 months from when you first got the denial. From the internal appeal denial. Federal ACA rules set this window, and Massachusetts law aligns with it. Miss this window, and the IRO cannot take your case. The deadline is gone. The right evaporates. Window 3. If your situation is urgent, meaning you're currently in the hospital, your treatment is ongoing, or a delay in care could seriously harm you, you may qualify for expedited external review. Under expedited review, the IRO must issue a decision within 72 hours, not 45 days, 72 hours. And in truly urgent cases, you may be able to request expedited external review simultaneously with your internal appeal, meaning you don't have to wait for the internal process to finish. That exception exists under federal ACA regulations and Massachusetts law, and it's the fastest path available when time is the constraint. One more deadline detail. BCBS Massachusetts must respond to a standard internal appeal within 30 days for a pre-service claim, meaning before you've received the care, and within 60 days for a post-service claim, meaning after you've already received and been billed for the care. If BCBS Massachusetts blows those deadlines, that itself can be grounds for escalation to the Massachusetts Division of Insurance. Keep a log of every date, every letter, every call. Knowing the right exists is half the battle. Here's how you actually use it. 5 steps, each one specific. Step 1. Get your denial letter and find the phrase adverse determination or final adverse determination. That language is the legal trigger. BCBS Massachusetts is required by state law to include information about your external review rights in that letter. Find it. Read it. It will reference either the Massachusetts Division of Insurance or the process for requesting an independent medical review. Step 2. File your internal appeal first, and do it in writing, not by phone. In writing, with a delivery method you can prove, meaning certified mail or a documented secure upload through BCBS's portal. Your internal appeal should include a letter from your treating physician stating specifically why the denied service is medically necessary. Use that exact phrase, medically necessary. Include clinical guidelines, peer-reviewed literature if your doctor can provide it, and your CPT codes and diagnosis codes from the original claim. The internal appeal is your evidentiary foundation. What you submit there follows you into the external review. Step 3. Once you receive the final internal denial, immediately request external review. You can do this directly through BCBS Massachusetts, who is required to facilitate it, or you can contact the Massachusetts Division of Insurance directly. The Division of Insurance's contact information is public, and they have a consumer helpline specifically for this process. In your request, specify whether your denial was based on medical necessity or on an experimental and investigational determination, because those two categories sometimes go to different IRO tracks. Step 4. Build your documentation package before you file the external review request. The IRO will review everything you submit. This means updated clinical notes from your physician, a letter of medical necessity written specifically for the external review, any relevant clinical literature or treatment guidelines from bodies like the American Medical Association or specialty boards, and a clear written narrative explaining why the denial is wrong. Written in plain language, not insurance language. The IRO reviewers are physicians. Speak to them as physicians, not as bureaucrats. Step 5. Track your filing confirmation. The IRO must acknowledge your request within 1 business day under federal rules. If you don't hear back, follow up with both the IRO and the Massachusetts Division of Insurance. Paper trails win these cases. If you've got a BCBS Massachusetts denial sitting on your kitchen table right now and this process is making sense, that's what we do here every week. We break down the exact rights the insurance industry buries in fine print, in plain English, so you can actually use them. Subscribe, and you won't miss it. Here's the counterintuitive piece that trips up a lot of people. And it's important. Not everyone with BCBS Massachusetts insurance is protected by Massachusetts state law. If your health insurance comes through your employer, and your employer is self-funding the plan, meaning your employer is actually paying the claims out of a company fund and just using BCBS to administer it, then your plan is governed by a federal law called ERISA, the Employee Retirement Income Security Act. And ERISA preempts state law for self-funded plans, which means Massachusetts General Laws Chapter 176.0 may not apply to you. How do you know if your plan is self-funded? Pull out your summary plan description. Every employer-sponsored plan is required to provide one. Look for language like self-funded, self-insured, or the plan pays benefits directly. If you see that language, you're on the ERISA track, not the Massachusetts state track. The external review right still exists for you, because federal ACA rules extended external review to most employer plans, but you may need to go through a federally facilitated process rather than the Massachusetts Division of Insurance. The relevant federal agency is the Employee Benefits Security Administration, also known as EBSA, which is part of the U.S. Department of Labor. The practical difference is this. On the state track, you're working with the Massachusetts Division of Insurance and state-appointed IROs. On the federal ERISA track, you're working with EBSA and federally approved IROs. The process is similar, the deadlines are similar, but the agency overseeing your rights is different. And filing with the wrong agency can slow you down. Check your plan type first. It's the first question to answer before you file anything. One more thing on the ERISA track. If your employer's self-funded plan is administered by BCBS Massachusetts, but your employer is denying your claim, the entity making the decision may actually be your employer acting as the plan administrator, not BCBS itself. That distinction matters if you ever escalate to litigation, because the defendant would be the employer plan, not the insurer. So you filed your external review request. What happens next? The IRO has 45 days to issue a decision on a standard external review. On an expedited review, it's 72 hours. The IRO will contact BCBS Massachusetts and request your full claims file, your utilization, review documentation, and any clinical reasoning they use to deny you. BCBS is required to provide it. The IRO will assign a reviewer with relevant clinical expertise in your specific condition or treatment type. That's a requirement. A cardiologist reviewing a cardiac denial, an oncologist reviewing a cancer treatment denial, not a general reviewer making judgment calls outside their specialty. Once the IRO issues its determination, if they find in your favor, BCBS Massachusetts must cover the claim. That's binding. No secondary appeal by the insurer through this process. The overturn rate matters here. Independent data on external reviews, and this figure is approximate, suggests that roughly 40% of external reviews nationwide result in a decision favorable to the patient. 40%. That means for every 10 people who bother to use this right, 4 of them win. Most people never file, so the real number of people who could have won and didn't is far higher than 40%. That's the cost of not knowing this right exists. If the external review does not go your way, you're not necessarily out of options. You can file a complaint with the Massachusetts Division of Insurance against BCBS for any procedural violations in how they handled your claim or appeal. You can also consult a patient advocate or an attorney who handles health insurance disputes. In some cases, a single attorney letter citing specific statutory violations moves cases that external review didn't. Here's the bottom line. BCBS Massachusetts denies claims. That's part of their business model. But Massachusetts law gave you a right that forces an independent reviewer, someone who doesn't work for BCBS, to look at that denial and decide if it was justified. That reviewer's decision is binding. The process is free. The deadlines are real, and they're running. 4 months from your final internal denial. Don't let the clock run out because the fine print was hard to read. Next, we break down exactly what language in a BCBS Massachusetts denial letter signals that your claim is most likely to win on external review, and what language signals you need a different strategy. That video is already on the channel. And if you're in the middle of a BCBS denial right now, tell us in the comments, pre-service or post-service claim, and what type of denial did you get? Medical necessity or experimental? We'll point you toward the right track.